I love zucchini bread. Some people think they don't even like zucchini, but I promise you, in this quick bread, you are gonna love it. I first started making this chocolate zucchini cake in 1986 when I was an art student in Vermont. I've taken that cake and I've made it into a quick bread. So it's a little bit heartier and it makes a dynamite breakfast, even with the chocolate, maybe especially because of the chocolate. In this chapter, we're gonna make a chocolate zucchini quick bread in a bundt pan. I'm so excited. It's super easy and super, super delicious. I'm so excited to share this recipe with you, so let's dive in. First, I need to weigh my flour. I need 270 grams of all-purpose flour. You can use the cup measures, but as you know, I love my scale, and everything comes out consistently when you weigh your ingredients, as opposed to using the cup measures. So it's 270 grams of the all-purpose flour. And then I need to also weigh my cocoa powder. So I'm just going to tare or zero out my scale, put the strainer on there, and then add my cocoa. I need 50 grams of cocoa. I use a strainer because sometimes cocoa powder can be lumpy. And so I want to make sure that it's nice and broken up and smooth. Perfect. And then I can just strain it right into the bowl, and I am finished. I'm just gonna go with a classic bundt because it's beautiful. And the other thing about baking in a bundt is because it has this center column, you're getting heat up through the center of the cake, and so it will bake really easily. So not only are they beautiful, but they also serve a purpose. So I just need to get some soft butter. The trick to baking in a bundt pan is that you get a really nice thick coating of the fat in all of those little grooves. This can take a minute to do it properly, but it's really, really important because this is the insurance that your cake is gonna slip right out of the pan. Okay, one last check to make sure every last spot is covered with the butter. Nice and thick. You should see the thick butter on there. It shouldn't be so thin that it just looks shiny. You should actually be able to see the butter. One more guarantee that our quick bread is not going to stick to our pan is that I need to dust it with the cocoa powder because then you won't really notice it in the end. It's gonna blend in with the color of the cake. So I wanna make sure I get the sides, that center post, and all the way around. The last thing to do is tap some of that cocoa powder out of the pan because you don't want to have so much cocoa powder sitting in there that it becomes sort of chalky. So I just want a really light dusting of the cocoa powder in my pan. So I tip it upside down, tap it on the counter. I put it on a piece of parchment so that I can have that excess cocoa and just put it right back into my container. That way I haven't wasted any of my precious cocoa powder. Our bundt pan is totally prepared with the butter and the cocoa powder, and now we can make our bread. The first thing that I'm gonna do is prepare our zucchini. I've already washed my zucchini. I'm just chopping off the ends. And then I'm gonna use just a regular old-fashioned box grater to cut this, but you can also use your food processor with the grater attachment. And that makes for a super fast way to do this as well. But this will get the job done. And just grate this. So I'm going for 2 cups of the grated zucchini. that I'm not going to strain. I want all of the moisture, all of the liquid from the zucchini in my cake, because then I have a moist cake. So if the zucchini is in there, you might as well utilize all of its special properties, mostly the moisture. It's 2 cups of packed zucchini. Really pack that in there. Make sure that I'm getting tons of zucchini in my zucchini bread. So look at that. 1 zucchini looks like it's just about 1 cup. So I need to do 1 more. This is the kind of job you should get your children to do. Okay. All right, so really pack it in there. So the next thing that I need to do is cream together my sugar and my butter. And I want to make sure that this has a bit of a lightness to it. So I'm going to add a bunch of air to the butter and sugar, and that will help the texture of my bread. I like to do this in a stand mixer. You can also do it with a hand mixer. So I'm going to take my room temperature butter, and I'm going to place that right into my mixer. And I have my paddle attachment with the rubber edge, because I always like that because it helps to scrape the bowl as I'm working. Lower that down. I'll just let the machine go with the butter just for a few rotations, just to make sure it's nice and smooth. If your butter is truly room temperature and soft enough, it will be nice and creamy immediately. And then I'm going to add my sugar to the bowl and just let that aerate for about 3 to 5 minutes, get nice and fluffy. One of the things that you always want to do, no matter what you're mixing, is make sure that you're scraping down the bowl. Even though I have a paddle attachment that has the rubber edge to it, I really want to get in there with a rubber spatula and make sure that all of the butter that's clinging to the bowl gets down into the recipe. The other thing that I'm going to add at this point is my vanilla, because if I add the vanilla or the flavorings to the fat, it's going to carry through the recipe even better. So a little glug of our vanilla. And then I will let this keep going, keep aerating to get a nice amount of air into my recipe. Okay, so look at that. It's already getting nice and light and fluffy. I'm gonna add my brown sugar to the mix. I always keep my brown sugar covered with plastic because brown sugar has a tendency to dry out and get lumpy. And so I want it to be nice and soft, so it's just gonna blend right into my mixture. Since I have the machine off, I'll use the opportunity to scrape down the bowl again. It's maybe not the most exciting part of the process, but it's really essential to scrape down the bowl. Okay, there we go. So now that my butter and sugars are creamed together, I'm going to drizzle in the oil. So if I drizzle it in, it'll all emulsify as it's mixing and become really nice and smooth. Okay, all my oil's in there. I'll turn the speed up. Scrape that down one more time. Make sure all the butter is in there and blending. And now I can add my eggs. Add 1 egg just until it's combined, and then we will add the second one. And then mix that just till combined. Terrific. I'm gonna whisk all of my dry ingredients together. I have my baking soda, my salt, my cocoa powder, and my flour. And I'm just gonna whisk this together until it's a uniform color. Since I have the cocoa powder in there, that will be my indication. Once all the cocoa powder is blended with the flour, we have all of our wet ingredients in the stand mixer, except for our yogurt. And now what we're gonna do is we're gonna alternate the flour and the yogurt. So I'm gonna alternate them because then it will blend together much, much smoother. So 1/3 of my dry ingredients and just mix that on low until it's blended in. That looks great. Scrape down the bowl, as always. Now I can add half of my yogurt right into the bowl. There we go. Mix that up just enough to incorporate it. It's okay if there's streaks of yogurt still in there. I just want to have it incorporated. Just a few rotations, that's all it takes. Now another 1/3 of my dry ingredients. Scrape. Don't forget to scrape. Okay, back down. Beautiful. Ah, it's starting to look so good. Okay, the last of our yogurt goes in. The yogurt is fantastic because it adds a little bit of acid to the mix. And so you get a really nice balance of the sweetness from the sugars and the tang of the yogurt. Plus, yogurt is such a breakfast classic, so it just goes with the quick bread. Okay. And now the last of our dry ingredients. You always want to end with the dry ingredients because it'll bring everything together at the end. Okay. That looks awesome. Look at that. And we're not even done. We haven't even added our zucchini to this yet, and it already smells divine. So I'm gonna just get rid of my machine and finish this up by hand. Okay, so I'll scrape off my paddle attachment, and then we can finish this up with our star ingredient, the zucchini. We'll just get all of that in there. Look at all that. Look at that. That's a lot of zucchini. That's a very healthy ingredient to add into your quick bread. And we're just gonna fold that right in. It's gonna add all the nutrients of zucchini, all the moisture of zucchini, and then the last bit is a little more chocolate. Just a little more chocolate. So your melted, cooled chocolate gets folded into the mix just to make it a tiny bit more decadent and delicious. Whatever's your favorite. I like a bitter chocolate. Okay, and then we just fold in our chocolate. And this looks outrageous. Super yummy. So all that scraping of the bowl paid off because it's so smooth and perfectly blended. Okay, we have our buttered and cocoa powdered bundt pan all ready to go. And then we just pour it in the pan. Oh, so beautiful. And then right before I bake this, right before I get it into the oven, I'm going to tap the pan a few times on the counter to make sure that that batter, really nice, thick, delicious batter, is settled down into all the grooves of your bundt pan. You just want to give it a few taps on the counter. And I'm gonna bake this on a sheet pan. When it's a little bit of an insulation for the pan, but also it just makes it easier to get it in and out of the oven. I have my oven preheated at 325 degrees, And the rack is in the middle of the oven. So just slide that in. You have it at 325, which is a little bit low, but because it's a dense cake, I don't want it to bake too fast on the edges and get dried out on the edges. I want it to bake really nice and evenly. So 325 degrees, and we're gonna check our cake in about an hour. I can smell the chocolate throughout the entire house. So I think we're getting really, really close, but the only way to know for sure is to test it with a skewer. So let's go in. I'm gonna tap it first with my finger. It feels pretty set, but we're gonna do our insert. Oh, look at that. That is dynamite. You can have like little bits of moist crumb on there, but it shouldn't be wet, and we are done. It's ready to come out. Look at that. It is stunning. So pretty. The trick to a bundt is that you have to let it cool for at least 10 minutes. Like 10 to 15 minutes is great. You don't want to go too long, otherwise it's going to stick to the pan. You don't want to flip it out too quickly, otherwise it doesn't have enough structure and you'll flip it out and it might break apart. So 10 to 15 minutes, then we're going to flip it. This is always the juggling bit of getting the quick bread out of the bundt pan. So you want to have your serving plate. The bundt pan after 15 minutes is still warm. So I need to use my oven mitts. And then I'm going to hold it on the bottom, take my serving platter, and then flip. So, and then I need to lift it straight up. Ta-da! And it's beautiful. So all of that butter and the cocoa powder that we put in our pan paid off because it is spectacular. I'm just gonna add a little touch of cocoa powder to the top. So right in my sifter, and I'm just gonna go over the top. Just a little gentle dusting of the cocoa powder, and we are ready to cut into it. This is the best part. Ah, look at that. I'm just gonna eat a little piece right now. It's still warm. Oh, look at that. You can see the zucchini in there. So moist, so decadent, so beautiful. It's so good. And just the slightest bit of sweetness to make it decadent, but not quite cake. So in this chapter, we made a beautiful chocolate zucchini quick bread in a bundt pan. The key to this recipe is the zucchini. Grate it and don't squeeze out the water because that's what gives you the moisture in your cake. Super simple, super delicious. So thank you so much for joining me, and we'll see you next time.